itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I call the members to order? I know it's been a long day and it's also very tiring listening carefully to the important evidence. We now move on to session 3, which is scheduled to run from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I do hope that we will be through in less time than that, but we're not going to rush it, and if we need all the time, we will take all the time. If I can just welcome the members of the public this evening to this session. This third session, we will be hearing from Staffordshire Public Health and 2 local doctors, Dr. Scott and Dr. Salt, who have been involved in assessing the impacts of the landfill operations on local residents. You will be aware that we are looking at the health aspects in particular, and so we will be helped this evening because that is what the focus is, and that's what the speakers are going to tell us. I should tell you that there is another parallel inquiry going on, Arcadis. For several years, odours from Walleys Quarry landfill site have affected residents and businesses within Newcastle-under-Lyme and the wider area. A group of public bodies, including Staffordshire County Council, Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council, the Environment Agency and the UK Health Security Agency, have commissioned an independent community impact study, the purpose of which is to gain insights into the health, social and economic consequences caused by the Walleys Quarry landfill site. So that inquiry goes further than ourselves, but we will concentrate this evening on the health aspects. So the proceedings and those on the second inquiry day on the 14th of August are being streamed live and recorded and will be available on YouTube in due course. We will prepare a report which will be presented to and considered by the Council's Cabinet and full Council. Prior to today, we have had written statements, and these statements will be included in the final written report for information, together with responses to any questions which cannot be answered today. Just in terms of housekeeping, there are no fire drills planned. So if you do hear an alarm, please leave the building in a calm manner and proceed to the Queen's statue outside in Queen's Gardens. Toilets are located near to this room. Please turn to your right as you leave the room and proceed along the corridor. I'm going to read out a paragraph on conduct. I have read it out at the start of each session, and I will read it out now. Conduct. Members of the public, this is an opportunity for elected members to question key participants involved in the Walleys Quarry odour issues over the past few years. Please allow the committee to do the job it has been asked to do, which is to listen to the invited organisation and ask questions. This will inform the committee's work, including preparing a report, which in due course will be presented to the Council, Cabinet and full Council. Please refrain from voicing any concerns or putting pressure on members. This will not be helpful. Please make sure that mobile phones are turned off. So with that, the terms of reference, what is the impact of the ongoing odour issues? What needs to be done next and by whom to resolve matters? What, if any, opportunities have been missed to resolve issues sooner? I have apologies from Councillor Moss and also from Councillor Fox-Hewitt, who is the designated replacement. Councillor Moss was giving evidence today at the tribunal, which is why he cannot be present. So we're now back to the original running order, which is firstly Dr. Harley, then Dr. Scott, and then Dr. Solid. So if I could ask Dr. Harling to come to the front where we've got a seat available. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to this evening. We've obviously got your report. I don't know whether you want to make comments on that or go straight to questions. It's a matter for your judgment. But whatever you wish to do, but members will wish to ask questions based on the written submission and anything else you may say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm happy to take the written submissions read and go straight into questions if that's fine.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'd like to ask the first question because we are concerned here with the health aspects, and we have been hearing all day more or less about the effect that this has had on people's health and well-being. And then there has been this study by Keele University, if I can quote, analysis of routine data, as well as a study completed by Keele University, has not revealed any increase in mortality rates, hospital admissions, prescribing or GP consultations with physical or mental health conditions that might be associated with exposure to hydrogen sulfide. I'm not challenging the study because obviously it's been done by a university. But what I am puzzled about is that conclusion seems to be well at odds with what we've been hearing about during the course of the day. So could you comment on that to get us started, and then I'll open it to the members. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. So it might help if I try and split the health effects into, first of all, direct health effects and then indirect effects. And then secondly, into short-term and long-term. So taking the first of those, the direct health effects of hydrogen sulfide in the short term. So we know that residents have been reporting a range of symptoms which are consistent with hydrogen sulfide exposure. Those that might report, I think, there's things like stinging eyes, sore throat, nausea, dizziness, headache. And so we take those as a given, but those are happening and have been happening over the course of years. And those are direct toxicological effects of hydrogen sulfide gas. And there are then, there is any risk of direct toxicological effects in the long term. Now, we rely on the UK Health Security Agency to do a risk assessment of the potential for those effects. And that is difficult at the moment because of the issues that I'm sure you're aware about with the monitoring data. So they do not have monitoring data available prior to autumn 2023 on which to base their health risk assessment. They're waiting for that data to be calibrated. Their risk assessment at the moment is that the risk of direct toxicological effects from hydrogen sulfide in the long term are low but cannot be discounted, and that the risk grows with the duration of exposure to sulfide gas. That's the direct effects. There is then a series of indirect effects, which are probably more difficult to establish. And so probably the most obvious is in the short term, this situation is having an impact on the mental health, which I think is to be expected. So people are reporting anxiety, insomnia, depression. Again, all symptoms that you would expect given long-term exposure to this sort of stressful situation. And some of those mental health effects will resolve if and when the situation resolves. Some of them may become long-term, and we don't know what the consequences will be down the line. There is then a further potential long-term health effect, which is that we know that long-term exposure to stressful situations, whatever they may be, does create a risk of adverse health effects. It is mediated through what's called the cortisol pathway. So stress raises the level of hormone cortisol in the blood, And when that hormone is elevated chronically, i.e. long term, it increases the risk of a range of diseases, particularly cardiovascular disease, so things like heart attack and stroke. And you look at studies that have looked at comparable situations, and the all-cause mortality becomes elevated over time. So it is possible that this situation will lead to those sorts of effects. And the problem we have in terms of the enumerating those is that those effects take place over years and decades. I.e., when we look at the routine data that's available now, we would not expect to see. It's the same as that the deaths that are occurring today, not due to Walleys Quarry, but just generally, are not due to the risk factors that people have been exposed to yesterday and the week before. They're due to the risk factors that people have been exposed to in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. It's the risk factors that people have accumulated over a lifetime. So the risk is that some of the health effects from Walleys Quarry may not be apparent for many years, if not decades, actually. We will see them in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 2050s. And the problem, coming back to your question again, is that when we look at routine data about the health of the population right now today, those effects do not show up. That's clear.
Yes, thank you very much for that. No, that's very helpful. So basically, what your paragraph 4 is saying is that there has not been a spike that could be attributed to Walleys Quarry, but you're also saying that there may be longer term mental risks. And I would then be asking the question or suggesting there may be long term physical risks as a result of a prolonged low level or even high level times exposure to hydrogen sulfide. And that might be something that medically we don't know about, but is something that concerns me. So could you just briefly comment on that, and then I will open it to the other members. Thank you.
So yes, you're right. There is certainly the possibility of long-term mental health and physical health problems arising from Walleys Quarry. And what's very difficult is to quantify that. It might be very little, or it might be more significant. And the difficult thing we're working with at the moment is that we just don't know how significant those consequences might be.
Yeah, and just for clarity, paragraph 4 saying there hasn't been a sudden spike.
So we cannot see in the routine data that is available at the moment any differences in health outcomes that could be attributable to Walleys Quarry. So I think I put in the report that gives us, I suppose, a little bit of assurance that there isn't a huge population level impact right now. And it doesn't give us any reassurance about any health impact that may be to come, because of course that's not going to show up in routine data in years, in decades.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hyde. I found that very helpful. So I'm now going to open to members. I'll start at this side. I think I started at your side last time. Apologies. So Councillor Adcock, or did Councillor Brown have a motion?
No, not at the moment, Chair.
Councillor Adcock, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for that answer. It is concerning how you say that we may not see some of the real long-term effects for many years to come. Would you consider there to be any particular age groups or demographic groups that would be a particular risk of long-term exposure to hydrogen sulfide? I'm thinking particularly about children who have been growing up close to the site, breathing this in. We heard earlier about Professor Ian Sinner's report about children's life expectancy being affected, especially those with, pre-existing respiratory conditions. So are there any particular groups that we should be concerned about?
So I think the evidence base about exposure to hydrogen sulfide over a long period of time is relatively limited. So trying to pick out a particular demographic is quite difficult. However, it is true to say that in general, there are some groups in the population that are at greater risk from all sorts of things. They tend to be very young. very elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions. So yes, if we were worried about long-term health effects, I think we would be most interested in children, particularly infants who have been born over the last few years, very elderly, and those with other conditions.
Thank you. Is it fair to say that it's such a rare phenomenon for humans to be exposed to long-term hydrogen sulfide effects that we just don't really know the impacts on health in the longer term, because this is a situation that's incredibly rare. There's not many sites like this where people have been exposed for so long. Is that a fair analysis?
Yes, I think it is. So this sort of chronic exposure, certainly in the developed world, is pretty unusual. Acute exposure is more common. So in certain industries where they use hydrogen sulfide commonly, people get exposed as part of the industrial processes. But this sort of exposure to at lower levels over a long period of time is fairly uncommon, which again makes estimating any future health impact more difficult because there is not a huge evidence base on which we can rely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard, for coming here this evening. It's really helpful. And again, the report is very succinct and to the point, which I very much appreciate. I've got two things that I'd like to raise. I'll start with the first one. And we've heard evidence today, and certainly evidence from interaction we've had with our residents of those members of the population with sensitive conditions. We heard today about a kid with asthma, whose asthma has been exacerbated, who's moved into the area, had exercise induced asthma, and is now reliant on their inhaler more regularly for non-exercise activities. And it made me think that how are we actually collecting our data? Are we looking, or are you looking simply at data that's flagged directly by health bodies as having been reported by the patient to be a consequence of the landfill site or odours? Are we looking more generally? Is the area contained within the area around the landfill site? Are we looking to evidence from GP practices outside that area? Just trying to try and understand where this data is coming from and how we're collating this data.
Okay, so there's three sources that we've looked at so far. The first one is that in the relatively early days of this, we set a symptom tracker to allow people to report symptoms, which they did in quite large numbers initially, which was quite helpful. And I think the reporting tailed off that for a while. But that certainly helps us to understand some of the trends in the way that people were experiencing symptoms. The second data we have access to is routine data. So it's routine statistics that come from the Office of National Statistics. They are only available at population level, not individual level. So we can allows us to draw insights about population groups, but not about individuals. And that data is available on board level. And so what we've done is we've looked at the wards within Newcastle and the Lyme. We're trying to look at whether there are differences between those wards closest to Walleys Quarry and those wards furthest away. There's data available in a range of outcomes, so things like mortality rates, both from all causes and respiratory disease, things like hospitalizations as well, the number of people going to hospital. And there is some data on their self-reported illness goes through various surveys. None of that data has shown any correlation between geographical proximity to Walleys Quarry and high rates of disease. Again, just coming back to some of the limitations. So first of all, the time periods in which that data is available don't necessarily relate to the time period where the exposure has been very high recently. And secondly, again, whilst we can draw conclusions about ward level, it doesn't exclude the impact on individuals. That generally wouldn't show up unless there's huge numbers of people. We've also got routine data available from GP practices through the NHS, and we can look through that at things like rates of chronic disease. So we've looked at rates of respiratory disease, rates of mental health problems, and we've also looked at rates of prescribing for medications that might be related to hydrogen sulfide exposure. So things like asthma medication, things like antidepressants, and things like hypnotic drugs that give you to go to sleep. And that data is available, so the unit of that is a GP practice. Again, what we did is we looked at the GP practices closest to Walleys Quarry and those that were furthest away, tried to understand whether there were any differences. We were also able to look over a period of time, kind of before and after, so the period prior to January 21, the period after January 21. Again, at the level of GP practices, that did not show excess of ill health. But again, the same limitations are true, so it doesn't exclude the health impact. The last thing we did was we worked with Keele University to do a more thorough research study. And the methodology of that was that we chose 6 general practices closest to Walleys Quarry. We chose 6 a bit further away, and we chose 6 that were very distant. And we looked for symptom complexes, that is, people presenting to their GP with the sort of symptoms that might be related to either the direct effects of hydrogen sulfide, so respiratory problems, or indirect effects like mental health problems. We compared rates of consultation between those 3 groups of practice. So the hypothesis might be that practicing places have higher rates. We were able again to do some before and after comparison. We also looked at control symptoms, i.e. Symptoms that you wouldn't expect to be associated with hydrogen sulfide exposure, so things like epilepsy or urinary tract symptoms. Keele did a pretty thorough analysis on all of that, and that is the most methodologically sound of the evidence we've got so far. Again, that did not show any excess of ill health related to proximity to Walleys Quarry, but again, the same limitations on why. So it doesn't exclude impact on individuals. And of course, remember what I said earlier about some of their health impacts from Walleys Quarry may not show up yet. And there's also an issue whereby, so if people who are experiencing health problems may or may not go to see their GP. If they do, it gets reported. If they don't, it doesn't. So again, that's another limitation of that kind of approach. So we've done what we can within the data that's available, and first of all, establish whether there's a health impact, and if so, to quantify it. And thus far, we haven't found a huge signal in that data. And my conclusion is, I think that probably gives us some reassurance that there hasn't been a huge impact at that population level yet. It certainly doesn't exclude an impact on particular individuals, like your individual child and his asthma has been exacerbated. And can't stress enough that some of the health impacts from this situation may not be apparent for years, if not decades. And so it will be our successors who are looking back in some years' time to be able to fully understand the health impact of the situation.
Thank you for that answer. And we certainly do very much take on board and very much are concerned about, in particular, children in the area who are being exposed to this at a very young age, with unknown at this point the impact on them during development, in particular when we talk about the cortisol pathway and the impact that might have during key stages in adolescence development is quite concerning. The second part of my question was whether we're there yet or not. We are very much reliant on the Environment Agency as the regulator, and we've heard a lot today about various issues, agencies and the public with environmental agencies. I just wonder should things exacerbate, numbers go in the direction, what options are there for intervention on this under health grounds? So if we ignore the Environment Agency for 1 moment, what would be the process of an intervention based on health grounds should the numbers get to a distressing point?
So I think the recourse would be to government, and we would have to make the case to government for an intervention of some sort. And I'm probably not the right person to talk to about exactly what that might be. And from the county council's perspective, we have been lobbying government for quite some time to try to do more. And I think one of our issues is that to an extent, we're trying to manage this as an ordinary situation. So the powers we're employing are the regulatory powers that are available to the Environment Agency. The Environment Agency is working within those. But I wonder that this isn't really an ordinary situation. This is quite extraordinary. I don't believe there are any landfill sites, certainly in this country, that have ever produced quite such a serious problem over quite such a long time. I think that's the case that we will continue to make to government. But whether or not there is a huge excess of health problems in parents, but actually it may be that we need more than the powers that are available within the law that as it currently exists, and that we need to treat this as an extraordinary situation that requires extraordinary solutions. What's going on?
Councillor Whelan.
I'm in awe of any medical knowledge, so this is very basic. It's almost if the things that you say in paragraph 2 and 3 are almost like immediate symptoms, and they're short term. They occur sort of immediately on the short term with exposure. Long term, we don't know about. I think you said we may not know for years to come. For short term things, and the other thing that you mentioned was something about in industry. You said it would be years before the action on this could be recognised. And if you say it's seen in industrial situations, any illness that is a result of exposure to hydrogen sulfide would then be supported, quite rightly, because it's an industrial thing that's occurred, by some form of compensatory damages. That's the norm in law. The problem with these people who may have been exposed to it long term, and it's a dilution because it's in the air around them, like you said, we will not know that. It'll be the next generation almost that know that. Where does that leave us? Because legally, we always look at the date of knowledge of something being the causation of an effect on an individual. So do we shelve that date of knowledge until something manifests itself as dreadful, and that would legally tick on from then? And where in all this I'm concerned is, whilst the industrial situation would have some form of compensatory damages, quite rightly, because this is more ethereal and not quite as precise in that we weren't employed and so on, that there isn't any right of recourse for these people. And that is, I think, would be horrendous. Can you see that situation flashing, where the one is compensation, the other isn't?
And again, this is probably a little beyond my field of expertise, because I'm not a lawyer. Just to recap, the direct toxicological effects that stimulise the stored probe of your business, that is the most obvious manifestation of this problem. So hydrogen sulfide levels go up, people experience symptoms, you can see it. The longer term health effects are much more insidious, and it is very difficult to predict the extent to which those might materialise. And I think I said before, it might be a small problem in the future, it might be a much bigger problem. And I think the trouble is we won't know until we start to see it. Just to clarify, my reference to industry was it was that some of the evidence base about exposure to hydrogen sulfide comes from industry. So we have a relatively good evidence base about what very high levels do to you over a short term. We have much less evidence about what lower levels do to you over the long term. In terms of any recourse to legal action that people who are affected to this might have, again, I think I only refer to legal.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Just
Oh, sorry, I didn't know whether you had finished or not.
not see. So do you think it would be possible in the future, hypothetically, to provide a link between that cause and result?
Possibly. So if we keep looking at population level data, particularly in those wards that are closer to Walleys Quarry, it may be over time that there are sufficient levels of ill health to kind of show up in that. It won't be for a few years at the earliest. And I think that is something that we would want to track. So yes,
Even after it's closed down, it still needs travel.
oh, absolutely. We would want to be keeping an eye on that. Again, what I said about the limitations of the data still apply. But there is what we can see at population level, and then what individuals are experiencing. They aren't always the same. So we want to be tracking population level data, but individuals may feel that they have suffered adverse health effects as a result of that, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to see that at the level of wards or general.
Okay, well, I don't see any further questions. So thank you very, very much for coming. I found that really helpful. I mean, we have obviously the short-term reassurance on the basis of the studies, but we don't have the longer-term concerns about the effects of the low-level exposure over a prolonged period. And that is something that concerns me particularly, and indeed the other members. And then, as Councillor Jones said, there is the concern about young people, and obviously you mentioned the elderly, and then people that have various comorbidities that may affect their response to the hydrogen sulfide. So that is a concern. Obviously, we're not in a position to address the reasons that you've articulated, but I think we need to still log that. Those points as of a concern to which we don't even have a prognosis, I suppose. Do you wish to make a final comment?
No, I mean, just to concur, really, that there is quite a lot of uncertainty, and that's one of the things that makes this situation quite difficult to deal with.
Thank you very much. So that brings that to a close, and we'll now move on to Dr. Scott of the Silverdale Medical Practice. All right. Sorry, yeah, we knew that Dr. Scott might be slightly delayed because I don't think the practice closes until 6 o'clock or thereabouts, and sometimes things overrun. So could I take Dr. Salt next, please?
Yeah.
So again, thank you very much for your paper. It's a matter for you whether you feel you'd like to draw out any salient points or whether you'd like to move direct to questions. I mean, we've obviously seen the paper, but I don't want to constrain in any way what you want to say or the way you wish to approach it. Thank you.
I would like to read my statement, please. Right, I'm Dr. Mixot. I'm not a proper doctor like Dr. Harling and Dr. Scott. I actually have a PhD in particle physics. But I have sort of been a sort of scientific interpreter for the community for some years now, and so I've sort of got a breadth of the understanding of the breaches in science, of the health, and so that's why I've been asked to come here. So thank you for inviting me to give evidence today. And I want you to be under no illusion. Walleys Quarry Limited, formerly Red Industries RM Limited, founded, owned and chaired by a convicted criminal, are not fit to run a landfill site. This is not just my opinion, but based in fact. Facts backed up by 109 permit breaches since the start of 2019, multiple enforcement notices, a suspension notice, a nuisance abatement notice, topping the table for serious pollution incidents 2 years in a row, tens of thousands of complaints, and hydrogen sulfide pollution levels that, even to this day, exceed the United Kingdom Health Security Agency chronic term health guidelines. On that latter point, I would like to read an extract from UKHSA's May 2024 statement, which is the most recent report we have. The risk to long-term health cannot be excluded where concentrations are above the long-term health-based guideline value. Currently, the risk is likely to be small the longer the exposure is above the US EPA reference concentration, the group which is 2 micrograms per meter cubed. The greater any potential risk will come. People living around the site may experience health effects such as irritation to the eyes, nose and throat, condition of headache, nausea, dizziness, watery eyes, stuffy nose, irritated throat, cough or wheeze, sleep problems, and stress described above. People who have health conditions that affect breathing, such as asthma and COPD, may experience increased frequency or severity of symptoms. Now, UKHSA is considered this a protracted incident, and monthly averages for the monitoring sites are above long-term health-based guideline value. And the odour annoyance guideline value is exceeded for a significant portion of the time. Therefore, UKHSA strongly recommends that all measures be taken to reduce the off-site odours from the landfill site to reduce the health impacts experienced in the local community. Now, UKHSA are limited in their scope to only describing the risks here. It's up to a court to decide whether harm is actually being caused. Back in 2021, local residents, Professor Ian Sinnott and I, proved such harm occurring to a 5-year-old boy, St Matthew, in the High Court, a proof that was upheld in the Court of Appeal. I stand here today to continue my fight for that boy, Matthew, now 8 years old, and for the children of Newcastle underlying who may be similarly affected by Walleys Quarry. Please allow me to read an extract from the approved judgment of the Court of Appeal in January 2022. Dealing first with Article 2 of the Convention, there is no appeal against the finding that the levels of hydrogen sulfide present a real and immediate risk to life, in that, unless addressed, the levels would lead to a shortening of life expectancy. Matthew. Note the approved judgment does not say may lead to a shortening of life, nor could lead to a shortening of life. It said but would lead to a shortening of life. Such was the strength of the evidence that these 3 senior Court of Appeal judges were able to say this with such conviction. The worrying thing is that I'm only able to tell half the health effects story today. The Environment Agency bungled the data collection for hydrogen sulfide, rendering much of the data unusable until a suitable correction can be found. However, in my discussion with Professor Roy Harrison of the University of Birmingham, it is likely that the data previously reported was an underestimate. Therefore, the health effects are likely worse than we originally thought. Mental health effects are a big factor in all of this, something I know only too well. Dr. Scott, a GP of Silverdale Village Surgery, described the situation as almost a form of torture. In response to the magnitude of the mental health effects caused by Walleys Quarry, the Midlands Partnership Foundation, the University NHS Foundation Trust, and its dedicated support services I have used myself. I would like to share with you a very harrowing story of the mental health impact that Walleys Quarry has had on the lives of people in Newcastle and the Lyme. I won't mention names, of course, because what was said was very sensitive. I had a fellow Stop the Stink campaigner ask me if it would be helpful if he were to commit suicide by slashing his wrists at the gate of Walleys Quarry, thinking that the publicity would perhaps help to end the suffering. Such was his desperation that the impact has had on him, and such was his desperation to try and help his community. This is the very real mental health impact that Walleys Quarry has had on its community. In conclusion, Walleys Quarry has had a detrimental effect on the health and well-being of its host community, and continues to do so. The community is sick and tired of this, both literally and figuratively. Action must be taken now. Thank you for your time. I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you very much for that, and I think it's actually very useful indeed that you did take the opportunity to read your paper out in full, because I think it does set very well the situation out in a comprehensive way that people can relate to and understand. So with that, I'll turn to the members who may wish to ask questions, and I'll start on this side this time, if I may.
I'm still processing.
All right.
That was a lot.
Well, we'll come back to you, but Councillor Jones is ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mick, for that really heartfelt and very honest submission. I'd like to, whilst we have you here, lean on your scientific and technical expertise and just clarify that I've got things completely correct, if that's okay. So the history of assessment of H2S at this site has started with sniff tests, which were frankly awful, pathetic, and should never have been in place. It then moved to monitoring sites with power failures that missed some of the worst windows of exposure. It's then been constant battles to keep those monitoring sites. And then we end up with an incorrect calibration, which very much suggests has been underreported levels of H2S. We then have the legal test of harm, which you outlined exceptionally well. And at appeal, that legal test was very much solidified by the judgment that the H2S levels would lead to a shortening of Atkins life. And that was based on H2S levels from incorrectly calibrated, probably underreported, from power failures during quite critical windows and from sniff tests. I think in terms of us getting a clear understanding of this, there, throughout all of this, strike a number of missed opportunities. And I wonder if you could outline where you feel that those opportunities have been missed and where you feel that agencies could have stepped in to do more.
Certainly, thank you for the question. Yes, well, I was listening to Steve Meeking MBE earlier today, and that was clearly a missed opportunity. In fact, I sent the evidence trail to Mandy earlier today, showing that the Environment Agency were happy to accept information that was given to them by the operator, despite the fact it did not match the events in question whatsoever. And then, of course, around about September 2020, that is when the previous MP, Aaron Bell, he wrote to the Environment Agency to request additional monitoring and was denied. And that was another missed opportunity. What it actually took, and this was discussed earlier today, was people in the community to force this. I actually had a gentleman called Mark Warren come to me and ask, would it be helpful if I purchased a portable hydrogen sulfide monitor? And I said, probably not, because I wouldn't expect levels to be that high off site. And he ignored me, and thankfully he did, because he was getting readings, and I thought that can't be true. So I sent him off to Keel Services to get a zero reading to just confirm that there wasn't like a drift calibration error in this. And he got a zero at Keel. So I immediately went to the Environment Agency around late January to the plan and said, there's something amiss here. And that was part of the reason why they brought in the monitoring. But again, it was the community that had to do that. Obviously, the missed opportunity to capture that first weekend. I was told that the reason for that was they hadn't got a grounds connection for the MMF, which is MF9 at the time. And that's why they weren't able to connect that. And then and so again, with that problem almost certainly would have exceeded the WHO short-term health guidelines. As it happens, that was exceeded the weekend after, and even with the data correction, is likely to still stand. So there's a missed week there. But also, it just seems to be that they've sat on an awful lot of breaches. As I said, 109 between start of 2019 and now, and some in progress as well. And to think that the suspension, so we knew we had a problem in September 2020, and a suspension notice was only served in March 2024. And so it just seems that there's been this almost desire to keep Walleys Quarry Limited still in business because they didn't want to be left with the orphan site. But my opinion is that they were going to orphan the site anyway. So I don't think there was any risk for the Environment Agency of coming in harder than firmer earlier on in this. I think December 2026, which is when they had to switch to an earth waste, I think they're going to walk anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, please, another supplementary, and then we must move on to one of the other members.
Thank you, Chair. It's pretty quick. And given this categorical absolute mess, I was going to say something else, absolute mess in terms of monitoring, and with your knowledge of other industries where monitoring and regulation, what do you feel would happen in those other industries if this list of errors occurred within that regulatory environment?
They simply wouldn't have the permits anymore. Something like the Office of Nuclear Regulation would not stand for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adcock.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your very impactful statement. I think that the amount of work you've done on this has been incredible, and you've been incredible to the community. So you've correctly gone through all the huge list of errors that have been made by the Environment Agency on this, but you're quite correct to say that there needs to be action taken now, as it's gone on for far too long for the suffering residents. Using your expertise and your experience working with against Walleys Quarry, what would be the actions you'd like to see the regulators or other agencies take now to resolve this in the quickest possible time and to recompense the residents?
Yes, thank you for the question, Rupert. Yes, the closure notice. This operator has a track record that and past performance is usually a good indicator of future performance. So to continue to take it on faith that this operator is going to be compliant is, well, it's actually negligent to consider that. So an immediate closure notice, and then the site needs to be seized, taken into public ownership. Erin Bell was talking earlier about the pot of money, and I hope this current government will be able to secure that pot of money as well. And then it either needs to be run by the public person, or given to a more reputable waste management company with a sort of golden hello, a large payment to sort of to cover the remediation costs. Because this current operator cannot be trusted. That is very clear.
Indeed, thank you very much. I've got just an additional question. So on the analysis you've done on the longer term exposure levels and WHO guidelines and so on. I know that the EA, when they do their weekly updates, and I've asked them about this, they only publish the sort of short term and they say it's below the short term health impacts, don't worry, it's fine. Whereas according to your analysis, you know, on the longer term, there may be a considerable problem here. Have you had communication with the EA and the UK Health Security Agency about actually publishing some of this longer term guidance so residents are aware there's a risk there?
Yes, a few weeks ago, I actually had a meeting with Alec and Mayor of the UK HSA, and I raised this point that by presenting only the short term in that little infographic, and not the long term, this is tantamount to propaganda because they're only presenting the number that they want to show. And Alec and Mayor agreed with me, and they have actually spoken to the Environment Agency about this to suggest that they show both. I suggest it should be in red. They thought that that would panic panic residents. So we agreed to keep it blue, keep quite a neutral colour, but to actually report the truth. So if the Environment Agency choose not to implement that advice, they are going against the advice of our health advisors.
Right, that's very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor.
I just want it to be fault. Whose fault is it? Why is it happening? How do we stop it? That's the same thing. It seems to have been a catalogue of poor tests, sniff tests, hydrogen sulfide, wrong calibration. I worry that the Environment Agency, although they seem to be at fault hugely, Walleys Quarry, because they seem to be at fault hugely. I've been to the site. That hole is a chasm. Even now, it's enormous. And I think they want to walk away because it looks too big a thing to put right. Is that a fair idea, or am I just cross?
I'll come back to the first point about the sniff test, actually, and touching back on Councillor Jones' point earlier, is that is how it's actually how the sort of the rules in which the Environment Agency have to work with permits. That it's perceived by an officer and they're not employing for its practical means on site. So that's actually the sort of legislation within which would be.
So sniff test is okay. My dog can do that.
Yeah, but this has to substantiate its breach. It is the sniff test is actually what they have to do. But it's of course it does make sense to quantify these risks as well. So the MMF should have been here a lot sooner. There should have been there should have been third-party calibration to check the methods as well much earlier, and so we sort of got the message a bit too late for this. As for blame, it has to be Walleys Quarry themselves, the primary ones to be blamed, because it's their responsibility to operate within their permit, and they have operated outside of it over 100 times at the start of 2019. So I mean, could you imagine driving down to Stone, where there's a lot of speed cameras on the A34, going through every single one of them at sort of 90 miles an hour, expecting to keep your license? It wouldn't happen. So I don't understand why the Environment Agency have not met this in blood earlier. And it also sets a poor message for other waste operators out there. We're aware of other landfill sites that are starting to become problematic, but they're looking at companies that are cutting corners and getting away with loads of breaches and thinking, oh, why are we spending the money? We may as well breach countless times and pocket the money ourselves. And that's the danger. It's not dealt with, but consequences now. This won't just be a Walleys Quarry issue. This will be the sort of hundreds of landfills in the country.
One of the problems, sorry,
Please. Yes, you're okay.
I'm so tense.
Clear to take off.
One of the problems I have is that Walleys Quarry, it's in line with what you've said, is a member of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management. I cannot believe that that institute, because the Chartered Institute of anything is usually very selective of who they're allowed to be members, because it gives them such strict cred within their industry. I cannot believe that they haven't been notified, something hasn't been done. They have considered removing them from their list of chartered members. It's almost as if the person who's responsible, the culprit, or the creator of the mischief, as you would say, is Walleys Quarry, but aided and abetted by the Environment Agency. And that makes the whole thing formidable for us mere mortals who are individuals, or even our small council, which is a borough council, or even our county council, you know, for us to be up against something that is so conjoined in sort of authority and, I don't know, resources. It's very difficult for us to fight the good fight on equal terms. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, that is a fair summation. Also, I forget which ISO certificates that Fred Industries and Walleys Quarry hold, but that's certificate that gives them credibility. The companies that are considering who to use for their waste management, they're looking for things like the Chartered Institute of Waste Management membership and these ISO certificates, and thinking, oh, they must be fine. And so yes, it gives that sort of false credibility, even though we know that from all the breaches and everything that I listed at the start, that it's clearly not being run properly.
I think we have to consider a letter to the Chartered Institute.
Yes, please. Be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the council vote.
Thank you, Mick. We heard earlier from Henrik Danchuk, the chair of Sunnydale Parish Council. I was questioning him about this decision formally agreed October 2022 to increase tonnage into the site, and he outlined a 56% increase on maximum tonnage that he worked out, which, given the earlier concerns before that decision, seems a very odd decision to make. And also there's doubts about the consultation process around that, because there were objections to it. And he cited aspects of the Deregulation Act. So the sort of legislative context at the time wasn't helping us really address this. It was helping economic prosperity, was mentioned. Now you've got a long experience of this now. Would that fit in with what you noticed in your involvement, that there was a kind of the balance was more towards the operator than to regulation?
Yes, because there is now a case that we've got to consider growth when it comes to regulation, and of course there's always a bit of an argument to be had there. You know, is that growth just the company itself, or are we talking growth as in holistically the entire community? Because if you consider the company itself, a few years ago it was a Sunday Times Fast Track 100 company, but when you consider the money that's been spent on the investigations and for the EA to have those 4 MFs running, and also as Dr. Harling said, we don't know yet, but there could be a massive health bill to come in the future. So is it really growth, or is it actually being a massive net cost? And the Environment Agency should have considered this far more holistically in their interpretation of the sort of deregulation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the one thing that strikes me as a chartered surveyor is if I'd done a tenth, or maybe even a one of what Walleys Quarry have done, I think I would have been sort of summoned before a disciplinary panel and struck off, which is, chimes with your point of what would happen in other industries. I did ask Aaron about the question at the end of his session, and I'd like to ask you the same question. Do you consider, and I used a specific word, and I'll use the same word, do you consider there has been a comprehensive failure on the part of the Environment Agency?
Yes, that has been.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Well, look, thank you very much indeed for that. I mean, I think that has been really informative, and I'm grateful to you for the time that you've taken to come this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we now well, there we are. And I think the panel, the committee feel exactly the same way. So thank you. We now move on to Dr. Scott from the Silverdale Medical Practice. Thank you very much for coming, and I gather you've had a busy day and you managed to just escape from the practice in time to get here. So I mean, it is really appreciated that you've come after what I know will have been a busy time for you. I don't know whether you'd like to make an opening statement or move to questions. We're entirely in your hands.
Thank you. Yeah, I just describe who I am, my perspectives, the community knows.
Yes, please. I mean, I think that's important, and I just want you to take it how you want to take it, and then we'll ask questions later. Thank you.
So my name's Dr. Paul Scott. I'm a senior partner at Silverdale.
Switch your mic on.
Sorry, can you use the microphone? And start again.
My name is Dr. Paul Scott. I'm the senior partner at GP at Silverdale Michael's Practice, which is the largest practice in Newcastle, 12,000 patients. Our main premises is in Silverdale, and Wyckoff is just along the road, and the health centre on the Wyckoff. And our patients cover the whole patch, so they cover the 360 degrees around the Walleys Quarry. As a GP, from the perspective of really saying some perspective on behalf of all my partners and nurses and whatever, this really hit us. We became aware of it during COVID, during the end of 2020, going into 21, especially when we were starting our very large COVID vaccination clinics in about February 21. And we had to have, because of the protective consideration, we had to have all the doors open, all the windows open, loads of footfall. You'll remember the 1 metre, 2 metre apart, hundreds of people. And there was one particular weekend at the end of February where we'd open it the whole day, and the smell, it must have been the particular weather, the particular concerns that day on a Saturday, and the smell was unbelievable. Our eyes watering, smarting, very severe hay fever, patients coughing. We were all struggling, but everyone absolutely was waiting and going to have their COVID jabs because that was the biggest priority at the time. And then it just rolled on and on and on. Pretty soon after that, we started seeing a lot of patients turn up, initially for physical reasons, for a few physical reasons. So it was again sinusitis, hay fever type exacerbations, but also they had lung conditions, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, anything that was going to be affected by particularly breathing. We had to do a kind of a slight step change in a lot of patients' treatment, which to take the intermittent effects from the smell in the quarry to offset that, to neutralise that. So that was a wave of work for us. And once that had been taken into account, you all be it's gone up, down ever since. The thing that's probably hit us the most is the mental health
impact on our patients. So I don't personally live in the area. I come and work. I've been a GP here 32 years. But many of my patients, and in fact, some people who aren't even my patients have written in, because I guess I was a site spokesman because I was also chair, I was LMC, local medical committee chair from 2011 to 2023. Like the voice of local general practice for North Staffordshire and Stoke. Biggest impact on us was listening to the stories of the effects of the smell at random times of the day, and particularly at night, and the effect on the quality of sleep, being woken up with smell, choking, disorderly sleep. Many patients really said it was especially worse. This is a very recurrent theme at weekends. It seemed to get worse at weekends. Many mitigation was being mitigated at weekends, and that would affect on the Friday, Saturday, Sundays. People got for a lot of work people that they like some time. And of course, we experienced it in the practice, and it's odd because I would come into work on a Monday morning, only away, and there would be no smell outside. But you'd open the doors to your practice, and there was this lag effect, residual smell in the building that we then had to ventilate and open out. And then other times would come in, and I'd turn up again on a Monday morning, and you could smell outside. But you go in the building and you haven't quite got in. It's weird, inverse law of smell of buildings and delay. So as a practice, we coded the most significant patients. We had a search, and at the moment there is a code on our practice. This was an informal arrangement. We contacted public health. There was no real guidance support. They said because it wasn't acute at risk of severe health right then, they had nothing, no suggestions, nothing to offer. There was no real contact in the system. We adopted our own coding mechanism. Right now, of our patients, there are 213 which have the Walleys Quarry code and 185 libraries at the moment where it's an active going issue. So I guess we also then had to take into account it impacted on how we treated people with mental health conditions. People with no mental health condition develop them through the stress, and the stress, by definition, is a condition where you are in a situation that is the trigger is outside your control, and this is outside the members of the public's control. The worst bit of the stress is it's random. It would go away for a week, 2 or 3. And then whatever conditions would change, whatever environment or I guess the deliveries or the mitigation failing, and then it would flare up again. And that randomness affecting the quality of people's lives over months and months and months and years, that's a real effect on their quality of lives. I'm not an expert on it works for the long-term effects worry me. I'm not my area of expertise. I'm just seeing it day in, day out, week by week. And therefore, in a way, I'm here to just almost bear witness of that, and to reinforce the sheer reality, and the patients have come to their GPs about it, not to sort it or cure it, but to end up having additional medicines for either their chronic conditions and for the mental health and stress. That is a definite reality in large numbers.
Okay, thank you. You're happy to take questions now. I've got one, I guess it's more of an observation, and it came up in the first presentation about the Keel study, which I'm certain it's a university study, it's really carefully done. So I'm not challenging the findings there, but there does seem to be a disconnect between your experiences and the finding of the study, which I can't quite understand why that should be, because, you've got first-hand experience. You're talking in terms of increased medications, you're talking in terms of specific symptoms and so on and so forth. So could you comment on that, please, because it may help us?
With the largest practice in Newcastle, I'm unaware of the study. Didn't contact me, didn't contact my practice. My understanding is I don't know much about, which is incredulous. But also I think when you're talking about the tens and tens of thousands of appointments a year, the whole of the general discipline provides in this patch, and the overlap of, and if think of how it looked at it, the overlap of many of the symptoms overlap with many other conditions. So the code, and there are no, you have software codes for diagnosis. We created the code I quoted to you is a de novo artificial created one inside my own practice. There is no code for, or whether a code for hydrogen sulfide or for the quarry effects or whatever. So they're searching for symptoms and signs that overlap with the common cold, flu, hay fever, asthma, and all the other and of course all the other mental health codes. So I wouldn't, with my experience, I wouldn't know how they would pick it up very easily on the searches that they could do, because it's not something you can easily retrospectively identify in a, so we're not actually coding it, and it's not a national target or a local target or a health, if you like, a health diagnosis. It would be hidden behind. Now they may have carefully tried to look at instances of all those conditions or changes, but loads of other things going on as well, called COVID being released. So I don't know. I don't know how I would design or do it myself. We weren't involved, which shows there wasn't a direct contact or an informed design of it. They wanted to do it as neutrally as possible. But how to find out these subtle, not subtle for patients, but subtle coding changes pretty difficult.
Okay, so I mean, I could deduce from that in other medical practices that were perhaps less aware, I mean, I'm just making a hypothesis now, they would suspect what they expected, and so they would put the hydrogen sulfide perhaps down to some other cause that identifies with those symptoms, whereas in your case, you're more aware, so you would look for that underlying cause in parallel or as a first stage. Is that correct?
I think in the medical records, nearly all of this would be what called free texting, so it wouldn't be coded or searchable unless you actually read every line of the records, which would be a step change. I don't think we weren't looking for it. We were, and the picture I'm painting was presented to us over many weeks and months. In fact, it probably understates and undersells it because there's just presentation fatigue. Also, most people know that even as GPs, we can tweak only a certain percentage of the problems and symptoms they're getting. So they're only the relative tip of the iceberg is presented to me as a local GP. Because once we've tweaked their chronic physical condition, which is very after their asthma inhalers or of the strength of their antihistamines or whatever, it's done. And we always want to repeat prescriptions. The thing that hasn't gone away is the mental health side. So, and that's people tend to come back, we present, we explain, and some cases, need their ongoing alternative treatment for that in the form of stress and depression medications, which is very sad. But we're certainly not, we're not out there trawling forward to trawling.
Thank you very much. I found that very helpful, and that does give me an explanation as to the apparent disconnect. Right, turning to members, I think I'll start over here. Councillor Wilding, are you ready? Or
I'm ready.
oh, you're ready.
I'm always ready.
Thank you.
Don't always turn the mic on, but I'm always ready. Do you think, and this is just what I'm trying to pick up, and thank you, that was very understandable. You said you noticed in 2020 during when COVID started, opening the windows and doors and so on, and it became more noticeable if the patient increased with those symptoms happened by then. Might it be that people were going out of the situation they would only go out of the area to work and come back, therefore it wasn't constant impact? They were withdrawing themselves from it and getting killed again and coming back to it. Once they were closeted and you don't go anywhere with COVID, they were then constantly affected by the smell and the fumes and the whatever. Do you think that might have been a causal link? Initially they wouldn't notice it because they were going to work and they're away from that zone. Because you noticed it yourself when you came back. And I've had exactly the same thing where I've woken up in the night and it's been torrid, and you go into a furthest away room and that's fine. We went on holiday for a week and came back. We could barely get in the house without putting something over our mouths. And that was a closed off thing. So I'm just wondering if this, going to work every day for a week, coming back, you were less exposure. Do you think that might have heightened the being noticeable?
I think I think that is a reasonable suggestion of the pickup for some of the patients with the there was we forget COVID now, but though it was smack on the same time, and it was a year into it, to be honest, and it was all during the vaccination periods. But there was a big increase at that time in working from home, of children not going so reliably to school, of people being more out and about if you had your hour a day or whatever. All those things were, but that would only mean that they were picking up what was there. That doesn't change the severity of it when it was coming through its peaks, and still does. So I'm kind of agreeing to agree, but it's just slightly raising the makeup.
It's just something that should be in my head. When we're away from it, it's less impactful, isn't it?
Yes, and I've heard that. I've had many anecdotes of people, for example, university students, local people going away to university, coming back, getting rid of some septic symptoms, getting them back, come back. People who, some people work away during the week and come back the weekends, the symptoms yo-yo.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, I mean that's still ongoing.
So that gives more credence to the fact that it's that's causing it.
It's a local factor.
Yes, please.
You said there's been an increase in mental health impact again. We're looking at people closed in an area. It's coming, it's going, it's coming, it's going. I can't go out, I need to go out. That sort of thing. Because of the COVID thing, it's almost put the whole hydrogen sulfide and the impact on their health and everything under a microscope and blew it up out of proportion. Sort of makes it bigger. It's already a huge problem, but made it potentially bigger.
What's been put to me more so is just the sheer impact on the quality of people's lives now and retrospectively. So it's just randomly affected the things that everything we take for granted, which is having a reasonable night's sleep in your own home and being able to not have the effects of the gas in your own home. Candle garden, which sweets the dinner. It looks the quality of life lands on one. And of course, the land is dependent. Every day, every week is different, as we know, from a geological perspective. So sometimes if the wind was blowing a certain way, or had rain, or we had that rain, we would almost begin picking up the patterns of when they would have the impact.
Thank you for that, Chair. Can I just make one small observation?
Yeah, please, and then I must pass on.
Absolutely, I understand that. It's just that having spent some time, 8 years as a researcher and 18,000 words, the fact that the Keel study you didn't know about it, had no contact with it, it would suggest to me that that research is flawed, having the biggest practice in the area, the most effective. Yeah. That's just an observation. I know nothing. I'm just inquiring.
I don't know how, as in it would not be that easy to pick up on the texting in the medical records.
But you weren't consulted.
No.
Yeah,
And I also I was LMC chair during that whole period. So I was the political employment lead for the whole.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chair.
thank you for that, and thank you for that last point. I mean, I obviously found it quite worrying that you weren't aware of the Keel study and for whatever reason it didn't engage. And you seem to be telling us that there are short-term effects of varying severity, whether it's physical or mental. And some of the evidence is suggesting that that isn't the case. And I'm not saying you're in conflict with that evidence. I mean, it could be that the Keel study and so forth is flawed. I'm not honestly certain how quite we'll take this issue forward, but I mean, it's certainly an issue that we need to capture in a coherent and comprehensive way for this report, because I think it's a vital piece of evidence in terms of the effect on the health of people in the community, in particular those in proximity. Councillor Jones, you have a question? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for coming to speak to us today. I think I spoke to you during one of your big vaccination clinics during the time when we had a really bad COVID incident going on. And it was very clear how much that impacted your practice and business as usual. I have to say I'm quite disappointed with what I've heard, because I was under the impression, and it seems mistakenly now, that the code that GPs were able to log Walleys Quarry related cases was a code that could be interrogated for data extraction. So it would be a code that is wider spread than simply a practice-based code. Because as you've mentioned, if somebody didn't come to you and say, can we have the data for this, they wouldn't be able to get that data. And my understanding was that the code, the report for this, was a code where that data could be readily extracted. I think as well, I was a little bit, I suppose, of the opinion that the reason that the data we cleared of earlier on today hasn't demonstrated a causative impact is because of small populations and the sensitivity that bridges multiple symptom groups. So both respiratory and mental health. And if some people are reporting for mental health and some people are reporting for respiratory, you're not seeing the overall effect without a single code for that. But I have just realised, looking at the numbers, and just correct me on this, I think you said 12,000 patients. I think you said over 300.
I had to, our personal code to be rented raise a significant issue. That the patients have told us and almost wanted us basically place of last resort for doing recording their records. Which is why for our own practice, we just invented a code. And therefore that's also why it's not aware that the code is used in our house. Then there could be other practices that have made it available. And so at the moment it's 213 ever codes and 185. Wanted that put in their records. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones who presented with some symptoms.
Yes, entirely. I mean, even that alone isn't a small number. That's a reasonable size number for something where sensitivity might be low and it's an emerging impact on the community. I asked previous speakers about what health intervention can get us there. What we look at this very much from the Environment Agency, and we all have our own opinion. I suspect it's quite shared on the Environment Agency's regulation and the impact that's having. But what health impact could we argue to be put in place that could really deal with what is an emerging disaster for our residents and the public impacted by this?
Largely that if there's been an impact on the like normal chronic conditions, that's kind of being dealt with, not described with an enhancement in strength of range of patients' treatments, and or they can opt into it. So a lot of those treatments would be as required, except by giving inhalers, antihistamines, nasal sprays, and whatever. That's on the physical side. I think the mental health ones are more difficult because the nature of the treatment is it's a longer term treatment because it takes 3-4 weeks for medications to get in your system. Isn't something you choose to do lightly. But some patients have needed to do that for the random impact on their sleep, their quality of life, whatever. I think some patients have just been people vary in their stoicism, how much of their colleague said, how much of their working week and the concentration of the input. So what can health can do all of that, but in a way that the first thing we want to do as a doctor is treat the cause. And if the cause was removed, well, I don't have a few of my patients. I don't know truly the one that I spoke to his mine today, as I'm going to. And they are seriously worried about in a few much more ill patients there will have been an impact where the marginal differences have become major. Matthew's one example. So it's but for me it's that sheer cumulative effect on quality of life. And because it's not gone away, because it randomly happens, it's just we're just mitigating it a bit. And that's probably why patients aren't coming that often to us because we haven't got the answers. We can make a little difference. And a lot of those things the patients themselves will have worked out how to do themselves now. And yes, that might be a few different descriptions, but gosh, this has been even from my practice's initial February 21, July 24, people get used, fortunately get used to these things.
And just as a follow-up, I wonder if, given your experience within your own practice and also your role up until recently, chairing the representative body of the GPs in the North Staffordshire area, how difficult would it be to have every GP practice within Newcastle having a code such as yours? So that should we want to obtain this data, we could obtain this data by approaching the practices directly.
There's retrospective and prospective aspects there. So patients' records are live documents that are also then historical. My practice used probably certainly in spring, summer of 21, patients were just coming, were wanting it in their records, but for exactly that reason. So for practice, for going forwards and saying, right, let's go, let's have a policy, let's put this thing, share it, and put it on the patient's record for every patient comes forward. That's pretty straightforward. Provided we remember to do it, yeah, it becomes a live active thing. Retrospectively, it's not. You can, if you got good justification, you can insert codes. Anything that's accurate is fair. But the problem is, it would have all been free texted in. By free text, I mean just to GP records. Every time I see someone, there's a problem target, and then the medications all coded, much of the results, and then some of the diagnoses, so that they're relevant and accurate. Those things aren't overly done, so that doing it retrospectively would be difficult. An additional, significant additional, and also it got basically just reading those from comments around that we go.
But it is possible to do. If not retrospectively going forward, if we said tomorrow.
Yeah, if there was the strong desire, and you could put boundaries around that and say, yeah, please use this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think actually there would be a bit of hope that if you have other practices doing it going forward, you've got the before and after data, and also it wouldn't be totally reliable. It would be a reasonable hypothesis to say that the other data could be extrapolated backwards as a generality, just as an indicator rather than anything towards that. Is that a sort of correct assumption?
Yes, I think it would be the medical profession would be one half of it. I think the difficulty would be the public, what they would are they fatigued from it all, and or would they want to, who raises it? Yeah, it would be influenceable.
Okay,
Yes, the use of our code.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah. It seems to me that you've really been on the front line of this. I mean, your practice must be the most effective of any in Newcastle with patients presenting with physical and mental health impacts from Walleys. And it seems to me like you've kind of been left on your own to deal with this, to pick up the pieces wherever agencies have failed. And I just wonder, can you tell us what interaction you've had with other agencies? Have you had support or guidance from Public Health England or the UK Health Security Agency? Have they been in touch and asking for things like for data, for observations from you, what to look out for, what impacts landfill gas can have on physical and mental health? Do you feel like you've had sufficient support and guidance from other agencies?
No. Spoken no. But yeah, there was the early days, we had a contact with the public health and they had nothing to suggest or to offer. Because it was deemed low level. They didn't dismiss it, they just said it's kind of get on with it, treat what you need to treat. It doesn't appear to be life threatening. That would suggest. So that is that. Major agencies, we recently had some contact with the Environment Agency, given the statement. Some of the most informative were quite often the most informative people were the press. Coming to visit during Matthew's case and when you'll go that one through waves, and you learn things from them, their research. But yeah, no, it's been frustrating, and I don't think it's just my practice. If you look at wind map of Newcastle, a lot of it's gone east. The prevailing winds depends on temperature inversions, all sorts. All my colleagues have seen. I agree. We have certainly the majority of silver there and Yorklands, but we're actually to the west, which is not in the prevailing wind direction. So it's been what we've seen has been about what our patients have experienced. And then it's covered. It's covered the whole population. But as the frustrating bit is, and I had a lot of contact with Aaron Bell, trying to deal with it, is the controls that are otherwise within the wide gift of the wider system. Because of the VLAN, so we can improve things a bit to our patients, but we can't cure big problems.
Yeah, thank you, and I suspected that was the case. So thank you for speaking honestly about that. I feel like one of the issues we're hearing today is that you've got the regulatory agency, the Environment Agency, you've got the health agencies, and it seems there's just a mismatch between that they're not communicating properly, because you've got the health agencies are totally relying on the Environment Agency for their data, of which they've not been able to collect correctly. So all the health agencies are saying we don't know, there's no information here, and they're not communicating that with you. So do you think that the Environment Agency has taken seriously enough the health impacts on the community?
Not to date. I think they don't know how. On the report, the 10,000 reports they've seen into the public that have gone on and on and on for all these years. But the biggest, most reported environmental issue I think in the UK for many years, but it's been deemed low level. But there comes a point where it may or may not be low level. The impact on my patients is low, middle level physical, low, middle level mental, but it's sheer volume and impact it's having on the whole town and whole borough and across into Stoke. It's the sheer numbers that make this really big and important. So sometimes you get people really bothered about one awful death, but this is the attrition of thousands to a low level. So where does it catch up? But it's the sheer size of it that's important.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
We've been looking at the spikes and the triggers, and you mentioned it first became really apparent to you about February 21 during the vaccination programme. So a big marker was the upping of the permits, increased tonnage and including different substances from the October before that. So I'd be interested to know what your experiences were before that. Had you been aware of it, but it suddenly spiked up in February 21, or Was it something that you hadn't been aware of until that time from the patient?
This is really anecdotal and subjective for me and my practice. I think we've been aware of smells for many years, but we've never been aware ourselves. And perhaps it was a perfect storm of whatever had been put in, or the environmental conditions. But that it was the end towards the end of February. And that was on a completely different scale of effect. And that was affecting, you didn't have to have any underlying health condition. You know, your eyes were streaming, you were coughing, everyone was in a bad way doing that clinic. Everyone attending the clinic, people with no health conditions were suffering on that day and subsequent days, and intermittently over subsequent weeks. Because that was it's a very stark memory from Fergus and how bad it was. We that's when I guess I think that's when the community really worried. Because, and it triggered people coming to us.
Any further questions? Right, no further questions. I would like to just draw your attention, if I may, to Dr. Scott, to the we have got another inquiry day on the 14th of August. And the Environment Agency and the UK Health Security Agency, and indeed the new MP, Adam Jogi, will be attending that. It will be live streamed, it will be available on YouTube. But I mentioned that in case you felt that you wish to be involved on that day as well, in terms of the fact that what I'm concerned about is that for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, we don't know, your data, in effect, seems to have escaped capture in terms of some of the other studies. And I think it's absolutely vital that you are definitely linked in to those two key agencies. So with the indulgence of members, I would invite you, if it's convenient for your diary, to be involved also on the 14th of August.
Don't be on holiday.
That's fine.
Sorry,
Yeah, that's fine.
well, look, thank you very much for that, because, I really appreciate the impact on your personal time. But I think we've all felt that this last session has opened a very unfortunate window or door onto a perspective that we were not aware of. And frankly, whilst we might have had suspicions, I don't think any of us were quite expecting it to the extent that it's manifested this evening. So I'm really grateful for your willingness to engage with the further day, and details the Secretariat will furnish you with in due course. But thank you very much for your time, which is appreciated. And with that, I close the first day of this inquiry, and we will be reconvening on the 14th of August, when we'll hear from the Environment Agency, the UK Health Security Agency, and the new MP, Adam Dowie, and also hopefully from Dr. Scott again. So thank you very much. So good.